Hey everybody, how you doing? It's Jamal here with Review Me and Papercut Magazine, and we're with the awesome Kate Powers. Say hi.
Oh, hi.
She is an amazing fashion, beauty, advertising photographer based in Oakland, currently represented by Art Department, which is one of the largest agencies in the world. So we'll get into how you pulled that trick in a few. But yeah, so if you could just give the crowd a blurb or two, just real quick background, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah. Hi. My name's Kate Powers, and I am a professional photographer. I split time sort of everywhere. Live in New York part-time, California part-time, kind of always on the move. I've been shooting for, almost 20 years now. And I feel really lucky to do what I do. So I'm happy to get into it and answer any questions you guys have.
Yeah. So for 20 years, first off, you look like you're 20.
Yeah,
so
right.
I don't know how you pulled that trick off.
But I started when I was 4.
Oh, that'll explain it.
That's right.
No. So, I read your bio real quickly, and you touched upon your background in Texas and then also in Cali. So I guess how has that kind of shaped your creative style? And I guess where was that first initial, like, oh, I want to start shooting?
Yeah, I mean, I had kind of a roundabout entry into it. I grew up mostly in Southern California and Texas, and then I ended up at undergraduate at UC Berkeley. That's how I ended up in Northern California, and never had any idea that you could actually make a living as a professional photographer. I mean, it was so beyond the scope of how I grew up or what my idea about what my future could ever look like. But I always loved photography, and so I took classes as much as I could. There's not a really wonderful photography program at Berkeley, but I did what I could through sort of the art centers and shot bands for the school newspaper. And eventually my senior thesis there was a group of us started a magazine. It was part of an English lit sort of gender representation thesis program. And we started a magazine, and I was the only one interested in photography. And so I took up the art directing role, and I mean, this is a very long time ago. We published quarterly. It was kind of when Bitch and Bust and all these kind of small zines were coming out, feminist zines. And we would, interview authors and writers and photographers and do sort of pop culture pieces. And it was great. And I got to meet a ton of photographers because I was begging people to work for us for free. And eventually I met a handful of people who encouraged me to start assisting, which I didn't even know what it was. I was like, what's assisting? And they're like, well, you get paid like $125 a day, and you get to go on photo shoots, and you handle lights and film. And this is all back in the film days. And I was lucky enough to kind of get in with a couple of really awesome photographers locally in the Bay Area and start assisting regularly. One was a travel photographer who's awesome, and she and I went all over the world together, just 2 backpacks, one full of cameras, one full of film, working for Travel and Leisure and Gourmet. And I assisted for about 4 years, I think 3-4 years. And, simultaneously just kind of trying to shoot projects as much as I could and building my own portfolio. Got a website up and running. Luckily, KatePowers.com was available back in those days. And started sending promos out, little postcards, and going to New York and knocking on doors and asking for meetings. And then it sort of spirals from there.
Nice. So let's get into some of those early days. You mentioned just kind of sending promos out. So when did you branch off from being an assistant to being like, you know what, I think I can actually make some money from this thing? What were kind of your steps, and what did you do there?
Yeah, it happens kind of simultaneously. I feel like for most people, you sort of assist and then start, as a freelancer, you control your schedule. So you start to kind of take jobs when you can, say yes or no to assisting jobs, hopefully take every shooting job that you can so that you can get as much experience under your belt, and sort of find a balance until you're at a point where you get to say no to the assisting jobs. And, like, oh my gosh, I can pay my rent, actually shooting, which was such a dream at that point. And originally I started mostly for the early people that hired me were business magazines. It was kind of in the tech boom. And so Fortune and Inc. and Time and all these, they would send you out to do a 1/4-page portrait of some Silicon Valley tech, for $600-700 a day, which felt like $1 million at that stage. So, that's kind of how I got my start. You get enough of those where you feel like you can pay your rent, get a little confidence under you, and then, stop saying no to assisting and let the shooting take over.
Nice. And then also, so you were shooting travel, then you were shooting kind of business stuff. When did you decide I like more fashion, more people, more of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, at first, all I cared about was making a living as a photographer. I just loved photography so much. I didn't have this big vision that I was going to be a fashion and beauty photographer. I just loved taking pictures and couldn't believe that there could be any sort of future professionally for me. So, after a couple years of kind of doing every job that crosses your plate, I started to kind of develop a style, and I started to do some more work for sort of women's magazines, and the sort of softness and sort of femininity that I think is in my picture started to kind of emerge. And I was able to kind of to realize that that's actually really what I enjoyed. I think I was a little bit afraid of fashion and beauty at first because I didn't feel like I had a strong foothold, a strong knowledge. I was a sort of a tomboy kid growing up. I don't think I felt like I was ready to sort of jump in and say I'm a fashion photographer. So it sort of happened gradually, as most things do,
And then, obviously making that leap into fashion, would you say one thing that, maybe helped you was being able to, because obviously, one thing about fashion is it's all about product, but it's also about people. So you kind of had nailed that down before you jumped into fashion. So, what allowed you to make that transition, you feel like?
Yeah, I think knowing your style, one of the questions I think was about, advice to give, starting photographers. What are the 3 pieces of advice? And I think one thing that really helped me was shoot what you love. Shoot pictures that come out of you naturally. Don't try to be a lifestyle photographer if making lifestyle pictures doesn't make you happy. Don't try to be a, high-end fashion photographer if it doesn't feel like it comes naturally to you. People, I think, can read authenticity in imagery. And I feel like if you make pictures that people believe, then you get work, and they want to bring your perspective to their project.
And with the other 2, you mentioned one. What was
You love, be nice. I think that's a big one. I think loving what you do and being kind to the people that you're working with, I think gets you a really long way. People don't want to work with jerks anymore. I feel like it's kind of an old style, an old reputation of fashion photographers in the business. And so I think it's really important to treat people with respect. And I think it gets you, a long way. I don't know what the third one would be. Can we come back to it?
Yeah, totally. So this is actually a good, kind of transition. Ruth here, one of the users, asked, how would you advise crossing over from many low-paid jobs to higher-paid jobs? And so I guess more specifically, you kind of started that process in the story, which was you were just, getting 500 here, 700 here, this magazine, this editorial, which coincidentally, I believe editorials still pay that amount, actually, to this day. It hasn't changed.
Absolutely. Editorial is not where you make money in photography, but it is where you make great pictures, especially in the fashion and beauty world. I'm actually at a place where I'm not doing a ton of editorial right now, and I am trying to do more. It's sort of, you get so busy doing all of the commercial work that you don't make time to do the editorial, but editorial is where you get all the great pictures, and it's super important, I think, to maintain that work sort of as you go through the process, because it's where you get all the, a ton of great stuff. And tell me the question again about what was the original question?
Oh, yeah. So how did you cross over from doing those lower paid editorial jobs or whatever you could get into more higher end stuff? How did you?
I think it's really gradual. I think the work has to speak for itself. I think the work has to be relevant for the kind of jobs, that you're going for. I know some of the questions about, agencies and representation, and that definitely plays a big part in it, especially at the beginning. I think it's important, for some people. I'm going to go 2 directions on this. I think for me, it was important to have representation. I think that there was a validity that it gave me as a young photographer. I'm now on my 3rd agency, art department. I just signed with art department a few years ago. So I've had 2 other agents previously. And for my path, it was sort of, it's been important to have great representation along the way. I think nowadays there are a ton of photographers with Instagram and social media and all the sort of changes that are happening in the industry. There are a lot of very, very successful photographers who operate successfully without sort of formal representation, and they're able to sort of manage it themselves within their own studios. But for me, having representation, having support, getting in front of the right people, getting good meetings, having guidance on my promos and where those are going to, and how we sort of steer all of that, I think was a big part of it.
Cool. Don't mind the extra light that's on me. I'm gonna have that blocked up. There we go. Okay, now I'm good. So yeah, that's an awesome point. So who were your first? What was your first agent and second agent?
My first agent was, it's so funny, I actually had to remember her name this morning. Her name was Barbara Bowman, and she is no longer in business, and she was in San Francisco. Actually, I'm on my 4th agent. I forgot one.
Psych, just kidding.
Psych. So Barbara Bowman, and then I went to a New York agency called Eye to Eye. And then I went to an agency called Kate Ryan. And then I left Kate Ryan. I was with Kate Ryan for about 10 years. And then after that, I went to Art Department.
And so it seemed like, for you, it was always kind of this just trajectory of slowly moving up from agent to agent. And do you think that's kind of, important? I think a lot of people want to get into Art Department right away. And it's like, whoa. How about you just work with, Debbie down the street? And
I mean, I think there's a lot of different paths into it. I mean, I feel like one of my favorite things about this industry is that it's kind of a band of misfits. Everybody's got a different story. Everybody comes from somewhere different. There's no sort of formulaic, this is what you have to do to get into this industry. And so there are people who come out of art school with a super hot portfolio, and they get swooped up by a big agent, and they get a ton of press, and they got a lot of eyes on them, and they go straight into a big agency. And then there's a lot of people who, just sort of climb the way up like I have, and work for it, and hone your skills and figure out what you want to be shooting and constantly improve. I mean, I think that's would be another piece of advice, is that you're always learning. I'm always learning. I'm always in the process of learning new things about light, about, how, new equipment, new technology, new things that help me make better pictures. And I think that that's something that's actually really exciting about the industry right now, is that there's a lot of change and a lot of things that we're all sort of able to learn and grow from, that are happening right now.
Yeah. And when you were kind of starting out, were you just trying to shoot all the time? Were you just obsessed with photography? It didn't really matter what, where, who, when, or how, just shoot.
Kind of. Yeah. I mean, at that point too, you're in your early 20s and you just want to pay your rent. So you're like, anything, I'll do anything. And we still maintain it. It's still hard to say no to things. Especially now, I mean, I feel like I'm in a really lucky place where most of the projects that come across our plate are really right for me. People hire me to do a very specific thing and to partner with me in that way creatively. And so I want to do it. I want to do most of what comes across our plate. It's hard to say no, but you kind of have time for everything. But it is, I do like shooting as much as I can.
Cool. We're going to see if we can just bring one of our members on here to ask you a question. One of the top ones. We'll just see what happens. It'll be fun. And we have some other people who are joining us. Yeah, so people are starting to slowly come on board here. We'll give him a couple seconds. So while he's jumping on, let's talk about the here and now. So you mentioned all these cool projects you have going on. Let's do that rundown and talk about just kind of how that works.
You want to know what the next few weeks are like?
Yeah.
So we head down to LA this weekend. We spend a lot of time in LA, and I'm shooting go to LA for a minute, head to New York. It's hard to keep track. Head to New York quickly. I do a fragrance campaign launch for an intimates company. Head back to LA and do holiday campaign for a number of Paul Mitchell brands. Then on to holiday campaign for Bare Minerals for a number of different products. And then after that, we do a week for Next, which is a British retailer. So that is kind of the next few weeks. So we're kind of deep in production on all those projects right now.
Nice. And you mentioned that you're doing holiday shoots in March.
Oh, yeah.
Early April. So in terms of all these projects, how do you attack the creative and the process? Like, what's your process? You get a new project and then Kate does what?
Every project's different. I really like to be involved as much as I can with every level of production. I like to be involved in casting. I like to be involved in locations. Every art director or creative director likes to work differently. And so every project's a little bit different. Sometimes I get brought on and they've already sort of made some, talent selections and location selections, and we kind of hone it in together. Sometimes I'm brought on from the very beginning and I'm involved in briefing the scouts and the casting agents and everything. So, I love to kind of be in it from the very beginning. If the creative teams want me to be. And, it's really just sort of understanding the creative, kind of talking through the concepts, what they want to accomplish, and sort of making a plan and getting the right team involved.
And then I think there's actually a question here about saying, we'll transition. The basic question is, when you were starting out, how did you find your creative team, fashion stylist, MUA, hair, et cetera? And I would say it's probably a little bit different because when you're doing these campaigns, sometimes they already recruit other people and you just have to work with them, or you can bring people on. So I guess talk about how do you go about bringing people onto your team to work with them?
I mean, there are photographers definitely who are like, this is my team and that's it. And they have, one or two makeup artists they work with sort of constantly, or hairstylists. But, I've got a sort of a pool of people that I love that are my favorites. We've kind of got a running list and I put them up for every job, every job that I do. We've got people in New York and people in LA that we work with that we love. But that being said, there are sometimes I get brought onto a project and there's a stylist that they work with constantly, or or a makeup artist that they work with constantly that they trust. And, I'm not one that's going to, push that. If a client's got somebody that they have a relationship with that they feel really confident in, then, it's an opportunity for me to meet somebody new to work with along the way. So, I'm always open to working with new teams.
So pretty much you've just kind of gotten this group of people that's now in your circle, just from doing shoots and working.
Yeah. I mean, and you meet people through friends, you get recommendations. I mean, I have a very specific, I'm a pretty sort of loose photographer. I like nice people. I like funny people. I like people who take their jobs very seriously, but like to have a good time. So, I'll, working with a hairstylist, they're like, oh gosh, you got to meet Jenna, or, you got to meet Rick, or, people make recommendations and they're like, I think you guys would really get along. So you rely, as it is a lot in this industry, you rely heavily on recommendations from other people that you trust. And then, over the years, you just kind of accumulate relationships that you go to, when you need somebody.
Nice. Let's jump into some of your work here, and let's just kind of, walk us through, some of the stuff you have. All right, I'm going to jump into your site. Can you see that? I'm scrolling around, moving. All right, let's just kind of go through some images. So I know this is a Gap campaign here.
Yep.
So I guess just kind of talk about this, like, what was this like, and what was your creative process, and how did everything come together?
I love this shoot. This was a Gap campaign that we did that was sort of all about love and personal relationships. And so some of these are outtakes and singles, but the one you had up earlier was the couple is a model named Krista Kober and her awesome husband, Mike. And, it was a chance. He's not a model. And so it was a chance to kind of bring in some talent and, bring in some real relationships and get, a different level of authenticity to the imagery. I love that campaign. I think we did Michelle Oulet with her mom that week. We did Arlenis Sosa, Daniel, and with his son. We actually shot him with his son. And then there's some singles here too. But these two, Arlenis and Hannah, the double girl, the black and white shot you just had up, they're friends. They're both models, but they're really good friends. And so it was great. It was a great concept. It was like, let's just, the fashion was simple. It was all denim, khaki, and white t-shirts, and let's bring in people with real relationships. That one you just have, the red Miss Simone. She's lovely. Those are outtakes from a Bare Minerals campaign that we did, I think it was last summer, 2 summers ago. That's from a test. That's a personal project that I did. So what I end up doing is, because I'm not doing a ton of editorial, I end up sort of shooting more of these personal projects where I sort of get a team together, find a location, and just have fun taking pictures and trying to, get some work. But all that rooftop stuff is it was a personal project I did a couple years ago.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So, for you, and I think somebody else asks about personal projects, so let me just jump to that question, which is, yes. Would love to hear more about your most recent personal projects. What were, or are they, and how did they kind of come about?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I don't do personal work as much as I would like to. I also have 2 young kids, and so it's a little crazy these days. But what I do is, the beauty work is really where where I'm passionate about right now, and I've been trying to do more beauty work. And so whenever I have an opportunity, or we have a down week, or we create a down week, I try to do some new beauty work that, feels personal, that I can kind of get behind.
Gotcha. Yeah. These are really nice images.
Yeah.
Really.
A lot of that stuff is, from Bare Minerals.
Got you. And how did seems like you've done a lot of collaborations with them. How did this come about? Was it originally a bid, and how did that whole process?
Yeah, it started with, I think I did a lip, they have a handful of makeup lines, and one of them was a brand called Buxom. I believe I did a campaign for them early on, and then, just kind of graduated to some of the bigger stuff. And now we're actually shooting a lot of their TV motion stuff, which has been great. They're a fantastic client.
Let's jump to motion. Seems like you're getting heavy. Okay, so here's some of that. What's some of the newest? We'll go here. This is me. Should I try that?
Yeah, that's one of the newer ones. Yeah, I love it. I love the beauty, and I love what I'm able to start learning. In the motion realm. I still feel like I have a lot to learn in print, so I haven't done a huge push into motion, but for the clients that I'm able to sort of shoot print and motion for, I mean, it's a really fantastic process because it keeps everything consistent, and it's really fabulous to be able to see the imagery come to life like that.
Got you. And Ruth has another question here. How did you find your niche? And, what was the philosophy in terms of how it came naturally to you?
I mean, I don't think I was really that calculated about it. I think, kind of to touch on something I said earlier, is, take pictures that come out of you naturally, find something that feels good and feels authentic to you, and then it's easier to stand behind. It's easier to rely on your instincts when you're, making decisions on photo shoots, because it's something, true to who you are as a photographer, as an artist, rather than somebody that you're trying to be, or pictures that you're trying to take. And I think, I think that's a really important element in it.
Got you. Let me just pause this one. Cool. And then let's talk about kind of the 2 different aspects of kind of your work. Obviously, there's the technical side and there's the lighting, and we'll touch on that. But first, let's talk about kind of capturing the character and the emotion in the subject and making it believable. When did you feel like, yeah, okay, now I'm really starting to capture my models? And how did you go about the process of really, almost creating that empathy to really, get that emotion out of your subjects?
I mean, my style is pretty loose. And so I think what I've always done, and what I think you get better and better at as you sort of gain more experience, is just keeping everybody confident and relaxed. And I feel like I get the best pictures when everyone's actually having a good time. When women are free to feel sort of loose and sexy in themselves, and, there's music playing, and I really make sure that we have a solid crew around. Everyone's friendly, everyone's nice, no one's got attitude, no screamers, no yellers, no, as much as we can, so that the pictures are authentic. People are having a good time and able to, feel beautiful, and it's easier for me to capture it when it's really radiating from them.
Nice. And then, okay, so jumping to more of kind of the technical side, how do you kind of approach what you want to do in terms of getting your looks and deciding what your equipment is, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, when projects come across the table, a lot of times they have swipe. and there's some imagery that's been pulled. There's so much imagery out there in the world that most clients are able to pull visual references from which we sort of decide what our look is going to be. And then I sort of have a toolkit of things that I like to do, whether it's natural light, HMIs, strobes, a combination of it. I have sort of certain tools, we've been using, the breezy lights a lot lately in the last couple of years, big ones, small ones, those are adaptable for strobes or HMIs. So it's a super versatile tool. You can, spot them, you can flood them, you can, there's a lot of different light qualities that you can get. So we just sort of look at the project, look at the circumstances, sometimes, you've got a natural light shoot set and ready to go and it's, pouring rain and you got to find some other way to make the pictures happen. So, you sort of learn to rely on the tools that and actually now it's like there's always new stuff coming out, new ways that, we're able to use technology and the cameras and the curves and everything to sort of make the pictures work.
Gotcha. So for you, it's really just adapting to suit the needs of the project.
Yeah. And, and again, the projects that come my way are usually pretty right for me. So, the projects that come across, very rarely am I asked to, do something that's super like brooding and dark and heavy, where I'd be like, how do I want to light that? Because that's not really what I do. The kind of projects that come across our plate, there's a freshness, to most of the projects that is applicable to the kind of pictures that I take.
Got you. And we'll get into that. I think one of the questions was, and I'm pretty sure I know what the answer is, but nevertheless it was, you shot campaigns for Gap, Paul Mitchell, Neiman Marcus, et cetera. How did you land each of these? Was it through your agency?
I mean, it's a combination, again, like touching back on to the sort of relationships that you develop over the years working. There definitely are a lot of projects that come through the agencies. I mean, that's their job. That's their job to bring new business to the table. That being said, once you develop a relationship with an art director, they move. They go to new companies. They bounce around. They know you. They know your reputation. They know the quality of your work. So I would say it's a combination of, getting the right meetings, getting the promos in front of the right people, and the books, the portfolios, the websites, everything in front of the right people, the right representation, and maintaining relationships. So people know what you're doing, what kind of work you're doing. And I mean, there are art directors that I've been working for, and collaborating with for, over 10 years that have moved brands and moved around. And those are great relationships because there's a ton of trust. And that's a really lovely place to make pictures when your art director trusts you.
Got you. So let's rewind a little bit. So in terms of you were kind of doing all these cool, projects or shooting whatever came across your plate. And when did you feel confident that you wanted to approach an agent? And how much body of work did you already have that you had gotten by yourself to make it an easier sell to an agent? Yeah,
my very first agent, I probably wasn't really ready for an agent. I mean, I was shooting enough. I was busy. So I felt like, and I wasn't really doing a ton of advertising work, but I was busy enough that I felt like, some agent's going to be interested in me. And again, that was a long time ago. And I feel like there weren't quite as many photographers. I guarantee you, if I took the book that I had then to an agency now, I probably would not have gotten representation. And it was a very, very different time. I think that there were, websites were just happening, quite honestly. And there was, it was all kind of new. There wasn't sort of as much imagery out there in the world and as many photographies. It wasn't quite as saturated. But, that early agency, it definitely helped sort of propel me into, I think they got me a couple jobs and sort of as my own work sort of evolved, so did, my relationship, so did the industry. And then from there, I was sort of able to jump to a New York agency.
And what made you want to move to New York? What made you feel like, okay, I'm in Oakland or Cali and I need to...
Yeah. Well, the Northern California thing is just kind of this fantasy life that I try to live. There's really not for the kind of work that I do, there's really not really very much work in Northern California. I have a couple of brands that I work for here who I love. But most of the work in the US is happening in New York, LA, Miami, kind of that's the rotation. So I felt like I wanted to get out of the Bay Area. I wanted to take a step and play on a bigger stage. And so, I mean, New York is the only logical place. I think I met with some LA agents, but I felt like if I was going to take a crack at New York, that was the time. And I was lucky. I had a great relationship with Eye for a couple years, and they did some great things with me. And then again, simultaneously, it's not all the agent. Like, it's our responsibility as photographers and artists to sort of keep producing work that they can market. It's up to us to keep. It's not all on them to make projects miraculously appear. It's about having the work and producing the work that's solid enough that they can go into meetings and be confident about what they're representing.
Got you. Ruth, we'll get into your question in one moment. I just wanted to touch upon one more question that Kate, or point that you mentioned, which was you were kind of looking at LA, you were looking at New York, you were looking at Miami. Touch upon, I'm sure you probably worked in each of those markets now. Touch upon the different styles and what the industries are looking for, if you think you can, from each of those markets.
Yeah, I mean, LA is growing right now for sure. I know a ton of people from New York that are kind of getting out of New York and going to LA. I feel like LA was always kind of more celebrity driven, and there seems to be a lot more sort of fashion and advertising happening there. New York is obviously still the epicenter of everything. But Manhattan has gotten to be a very expensive place to operate. A lot of studios are moving out to Brooklyn, and but New York is fantastic. I mean, New York is where it is. If any young
I'm almost done.
That are trying to figure out whether to move to New York or not, I say do it. Do it when you're young, do it when you're hungry, do it when you're excited. It's an awesome place to live, and it's a fantastic place to make pictures. And Miami is really just a location. Miami is where everybody goes to shoot in the winter. When the client, when they don't want to go to the Caribbean or Hawaii or Mexico, Miami's just sort of become, where you go to shoot anything, super warm and sunny from, November to March. So there's a season there. There are definitely some photographers that live there full time, but not as much as you have in New York and LA.
Got you. And then, so what would you say for somebody who obviously just can't make the jump to one of these three markets? Because there's, hundreds of countries around the world. So, what would you say, all right, if I'm going to stay in Boston or who knows, New Jersey, I'm just Chicago, or I'm just throwing out cities, Dallas, Austin, what would you do if you were like, okay, I'm going to stay here but make it work?
Make great pictures, make pictures that people want. I mean, it's true. Photographers live everywhere, like great photographers live all over the place. And on some level, it doesn't really matter where you live anymore. The pictures stand for themselves, do great work, and people will hire you.
There you go. That's simple. Do great work. Okay, done. No. So Ruth says, I shoot product for a living, but love fashion. However, I was told my work is too static and I make my models look like objects. Is this really bad, or can stillness in a fashion image work? Or maybe I should stick to still life? And it's just your thoughts,
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's an interesting question. I think that I would never say that there is not a place for static imagery in fashion. I mean, I think that those sort of trends sort of come and go. I definitely feel like with a lot of fashion, people want to feel the energy of the talent. I mean, that's sort of what's, I think, in vogue right now, is sort of, knowing who the person is and wanting to be a part of their world and wanting to wear the jacket they're wearing or the lipstick they're wearing. Like, there's an association, I think, that has to be drawn. And so that's probably part of where that criticism comes, is that, as a photographer, I think we're charged to make imagery that excites people, that makes people want to be a part of that world, whatever the world has been created. But that being said, I mean, I think that there's a lot of, high-end campaigns where people feel static. And I think, again, it's just sort of striking the right balance for what feels right for you.
Got you. Cool. Let's see if there's any other questions that are really jumping out. This is a random one. When you first started out, how do you finance equipment purchases? Did you always have the funds? How did you get your equipment? And I guess to even follow that up would be, I read somebody interesting where going, once you get to a certain size, buy equipment, you just rent it for whatever the case is. And that's obviously your case. So when So, you know, how did you start out, and when did you transition to being like, oh, I just rent it?
I mean, I feel like renting is always a good idea. You know, I would say when you're starting out, having your own camera package obviously is a really big deal. And for some people, having a basic lighting package makes sense. But I feel like renting is always a good idea. You know, you can always rent lights, you know, even if you're doing personal projects. I think rental houses still give deals. You know, you pick up something on a Friday, you return it on a Monday, and you get, you know, you're only charged a 1-day rental. I mean, there's ways to, you know, to get around some of that so it doesn't feel expensive. And on bigger projects, obviously, there's equipment budgets. You know, there are rental budgets and that's how it works now, is that there are line items on all the budgets that, you know, for digital technicians, for equipment rental, for equipment vans, you know, all of it ends up being covered by the client. So, you know, you're not expected to own all of the sort of grip and lighting that you need to execute a job.
And then for yourself, when you were starting out, what was your basic?
Oh, I didn't have the money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you didn't have money.
No, I mean, credit card debt. That's how it works. You know, I mean, and then you pay it off. And I mean, it's like anything, you know, unless you gotta, you know, come from a rich family.
Yeah, so you just shot. So what was your first camera? Like, it was obviously film, I'm guessing. So then, like, what, you know?
It was, and it was a Mamiya 645 was my first camera. Yeah, back in the film days with the loadable backs. Those, you know, I think it's still in my garage somewhere. But I love that camera. It was an awesome camera. And then I had the Pentax 6.7, which is definitely still around. And I know a lot of people love to still shoot with that camera. Those cameras just don't make a lot of sense anymore for the kind of shooting that I'm doing, and for the volume and style of the jobs. But those are great cameras.
Gotcha. Yeah, so pretty much just hustling.
The RZ 6.7 was my like beast for years. I used to handhold that thing with like a 150 lens on it and a motor winder, and like I could literally focus that camera running backwards in the old days. Now,
wow, that's some technique.
I would think I would probably trip and fall.
That's amazing. So yeah, a couple more questions, then we could wrap this up. Obviously, because you're busy, you gotta go jet set. But I guess, you know, where do you see kind of photography going for yourself in the next year or two? Is it more motion? And then in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me personally, more beauty, more motion. You know, those are the things that are really exciting me right now. But again, I love taking pictures, and I feel really lucky that people pay me to do this. I still kind of can't believe people pay us to do this. So, you know, keep working, you know, keep making pictures, keep being excited by imagery. And I think overall, I think that there's great things happening in the industry. I think that there is a lot of content being produced. I think there are a lot of people that are kind of down on things these days, and there's a lot of competition, which is true. But you know, for the amount of imagery that you see in your daily life, you know, there's a lot of opportunity, and I think it's a super exciting time.
Perfect. There you have it. This has been a great session. Kate Powers nailed it. Love it. Obviously, everybody, you will be able to check this out right after we're done. You just can replay it right away. And obviously, I've made sure to kind of pick all the questions so you can click on them and then jump to those answers. Yeah, Kate, thanks for joining us. This has been awesome.
You're so welcome. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, and everybody else, feel free to touch base, and hopefully, Kate, we can get you back on in a month or two to just you know, follow up and see, you know, happen with all the good, cool projects.
Anytime.
All right,
Bye.
thank you. Bye.